The question we're going to talk about today comes directly from our Washington planning community. So the question is, how can I retire as early as possible from PERS 3 with over 30 years in the system? So having 30 years of service is a really big thing, especially if you're hired early enough to still qualify for 2008 ERF. It essentially gives you full retirement pension, no penalties at all at age 62 with 30 years of service in the system. So as long as you qualify for that, early retirement gets much easier. So if you're trying to retire as early as possible, the earliest you can take money from Plan 3 with 30 years in the system is age 55. It is a 28% penalty on your pension. That is for life. However, you're now getting that money a full 7 years earlier than you otherwise would have. Plus, you're going to rack up 6 years of cost of living adjustments along the way. So the way I've done the math on it is taking it that far in advance, while it seems like a steep price to pay, the amount of money you're going to accumulate plus cost of living adjustments is going to essentially put a big chunk of change in your pocket over those 7 years. And the time it would take for you to get that money back or make more than that had you have waited at age 62, it's crazy. It's like your 80s, 90s, even age 100, depending on how the cost of living adjustments work out for your break-even age. So when I say break-even, it's saying if we want the most money possible in our pocket from Washington State, the person that started cutting at 55 already is going to have a large lump sum already accumulated before they got to age 62. So the person that waits till 62 has fewer years of pulling that money out. It might be higher, but you have fewer years overall. And if you have two people comparing them, one person that waited at age 62, the person that waited to only to 55, they both start pulling out, they would both have pulled the same amount of money out at age, 90 something or age 100. That's what we call about break-even age. Now this depends depending if you're Plan 2, Plan 3, and really the big factor here is cost of living adjustments. The more cost of living adjustments are, the further the breakout even is, and it can be well over age 100. So if you're on the fence about, should I take it at 55? If the number's really going to work out, if the goal is to pull as much money possible, it's going to be probably in your favor. Now, it is still a reduction and you still have bills to pay. And at the end of the day, if the reduction reduces it so much to the point where you can't afford to cover your mortgage, your car, your insurance, your healthcare, and all the things you spend money on, then it's probably not the best play. So while I love helping people retire early, I do spend a fair amount of time also telling people that they cannot retire early, that they need to start saving more or reducing their spending because they're spending too much. You can't expect to earn $200,000, go down to making $100,000 and still keep the same spending plan oftentimes. And some people have a hard time swallowing that pill, and we have to tell them you can't retire as early as they otherwise wanted to. You have to give up something at that point. All right, so that's the next part, is understanding what your budget is, how much you really need to coming in. And remember, there's two numbers. There's the need and the want. The need is, bottom line, what has to come out to cover all our mandatory expenses. So this is like your healthcare bill. What does it cost to live? You're looking at your rent, mortgage, utilities, grocery bill, gas, car pays, everything that's like essentially mandatory, none of the fun stuff yet. That's like your bare minimum. And then you do the want side. And that's when you have fun. That's when you put your vacation money in, spoiling the grandkids, things like that. You should always have some type of buffer in it, but it's important to run two different numbers from there. There's some people that when they're doing their planning have one budget number. They're saying we're currently spending $9,000 per month. We don't want to change anything. So we're going to keep working until we can safely generate $9,000 per month. And that's one way to do it, but that's a high number and you might have end up working a few years longer than you otherwise could have. If you were to trim that up a bit, and it could survive on $8,000 per month or $7,000. So the more money you want to live off of, the higher your income needs to be. Theoretically, a lot of times you have to work longer. Now, Washington State employees, you can kind of get away with sometimes because you do have pensions that are tied to your top 5 consecutive years income. So if you do land a really good high paying job at some point in your career, that's automatically going to impact your retirement income. And you may not need to save as much or work longer to accumulate more retirement income. Look at how early you're able to retire based on what the penalties are, and look at your budget, see what can be trimmed or not. And that'll give you a good idea of when retirement or when early retirement is possible. I would also run backup scenarios because life's going to happen. So when I take on clients, we run a normal scenario, assuming everything stays the same. And then we will play with inflation numbers. I would try to break them through long-term care expenses. We'll break it through early death. And we try to break the plan through just having ongoing expenses be a lot higher. So what I'm saying here is if a client comes in and says, hey, we're going to spend $8,000 per month, we run one scenario, $8,000 per month, now another one spending more. We'll say $9,000, $10,000 per month. If we can still go at $9,000 per month, that's a pretty healthy plan. If we can't, that means we don't have a lot of buffer room here for any expenses or large expenses that could come on an occurring basis. And then should someone pass away, we look at life insurance involved in here. How does that affect pension? How does that affect Social Security? Things like that. So we try to figure out what can go wrong to see if we truly can retire early. Because you can probably retire early running a quick and easy spreadsheet on Excel, but if there is that one-off scenario that happens, it can completely derail you if you're not prepared for it or didn't think to plan for it. So that's where we come into play, is to look at all the different avenues to see what could potentially go wrong and what our willingness to adapt the plan is to that situation. So I would start with that. Just get a budget in place, play with your numbers, and try to see when pension and your portfolio income, Social Security and stuff is all going to line up to generate the income required. And that's how to go about it. All right, so that's it for this video. Remember, if you're not part of the Washington Estate Planning community, the link to join is in the show notes or the description below. It's free to join. There's free classes on there. We've got over 100 active members inside the community now to post questions and polls and things like that. So if you want to get involved in your planning at a deeper level with your peers and experts that have been in your position before, I'd recommend joining that community. And until next time, remember that your future depends on what you do today.